Hi everyone, welcome to JSM Impact Conversations. Today we have a very interesting conversation, and I am really proud and happy to be joined by two really inspiring and also really successful scholars that have really important experiences in the ethnographic and the interpretist research space. So I am today joined by two really good friends and scholars that will help us unpack what ethnography means and what we as supply chain management scholars can learn from their experiences to make sure we approach ethnography from a more robust, informed, and rigorous approach. And today I'm joined by Vang and also Helene, Balslev, and Clausen. Helene and Vang, welcome.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, and thank you for having us here.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Adam.
Thank you so much. Before we talk about the important and serious stuff, how are you? How is everything? How is life?
It's very good, but we have one thing that bugs us a little bit. So when we do the ethnographic research, we sit two here, but in reality, we have a huge crowd, a big team of people in the global south who weren't capable of being here today. But we owe our gratitude to all the people in the global south that works very closely with us. We have a big team of men, women, PhD students in Bangladesh, previous PhD students in Myanmar, very good close colleagues in Uganda, and they are really crucial with this. We have the pleasure of synthesizing and giving their feedback, their knowledge, but in reality, it's something co-created with a very strong anchor from their side. But apart from that, that they cannot be present, we're good.
Yeah, apart from that. And yes, we have a very long journey with them within especially the ethnography in this part where they co-create and inspire also the methods within ethnography to be developed even more.
But since you're the guest star here, maybe a word about who you are.
Okay, I'm Helene Balslev Clausen from Aalborg University in Denmark, and I'm anthropologist by training and working with ethnography, in particular creative methods and theory building within both Africa, Asia nowadays, in Bangladesh, and then also Latin America for around 15, 20 years.
And more recently, you have turned a lot to looking at it in the supply chain context, yes?
Yes.
And also with how emerging technologies can impact it. Helene was behind co-creating with our partners in Uganda a big project on how to introduce regenerative agricultural practices in Uganda, but where you also included some reflections on drones, and I had the pleasure of playing a minor part in that project.
Yeah, in that project in particular, we tried to set up a female value chain, looking at how females are different in the way they approach agricultural practices and using their former knowledge and new knowledge as well in this process.
No, this is really interesting and really exciting. Also, I remember last month we had a really interesting conversation between the three of us. It was really eye-opening. And Helene, I will start with one quick question, and I'm sure you will be able to unpack. And then Jan Bang, please join us in this debate. But Helena, what I was really impressed by, you were building theory through really creative approaches and also innovative ways of working with the people, with the communities on the ground. And Jan Wang also mentioned something really important. We are just tip of the iceberg, but this is actually a really collective effort. We build knowledge with so many people on the ground. So in your experiences, Helena, I was really impressed about how you were literally understanding the local context and the way you were working with the local communities was key to actually develop this know-how and to perform your ethnographic research in a more robust way. Can you help us understand how you were literally working with the local communities and how were you making them part of this research?
Yes, in the Ugandan project, for instance, or in other projects as well, also what we are starting with in Bangladesh and Old Dhaka is trying to understand the people living there. In Bangladesh, it's the factory, the owners, workers, the environment as such. And to do that, we need to understand more their way of perceiving the world, understanding the world, how they act in the world, so we can use and benefit from that knowledge whenever we want to create changes. So that's a very general overall view of the process, very brief, but we need to use a lot of time, spend a lot of time. We call it reflexive ethnography. Also use sort of beginning by Alverson.
Swedish professor introducing reflexive methods.
And he talks about how supply chains often are building upon, to get into a field, you want permission. You ask the owner of the factory, for instance, you ask the cooperative in the farms, the leader, if you can talk and do surveys, interview people. But instead, we start talking, getting what we would call access. And that process of access is also a process of trust building. So the permission is far ahead. Before you reach permission, you have to have the long path. That could be either short-term visits, or it can be you stay for longer periods, depending also of how you use yourself as a researcher. You need to use yourself and sense your environment in the same time, just not ask and come with a paper that you need to sign to get into entrance to whatever, it's a cooperative, the farm, whatever. So
Absolutely.
the process of access is extremely important. And you also visit several. You don't go out to one or two. You sort of walk around, search, ask around with neighboring factories or neighboring farmers. So it's a very different pre-process, you could say, compared to what I've been reading in the supply chain. Which in the end Jan was nice, very nice, polite to invite me to.
You can also link it to the longer history of the type of research we've been doing with suppliers in the global south. It actually started with the more action research where Professor Peter Hasle from my university was more or less introducing it to me. I was a more conventional, positivist, quantitative researcher doing a lot of regressions, etc. And we started to collaborate when the Rana Plaza accident happened. He was a specialist in work environment, had previously been working in Thailand with it, but had been mainly in Denmark for some years, and I had been working with suppliers. So we came together with this action research, and by courtesy of, we did a lot, and we kept on experiencing failures. And Mark Pagel, he actually invited us to write a paper for Journal of Supply Chain Management on designing interventions. And this sort of started mine and Peter's reflections on why don't they deliver the type of results that we would like to in supply chain. It applies also to our policy recommendation and other transformative processes. And then gradually I started to work more with Helene, and she introduced us to things in ethnography, such as thick description, coming back from a very interesting paper by the anthropologist Clifford Geertz on a Balinese cockfight. And there I started to come closer to the recognition that when we do interventions, and we have been doing interventions for theory development and practical purposes in garment in Bangladesh, in garment in Myanmar, also working closely with trade unions in Myanmar, in tanneries in Bangladesh, where Helene is also playing a role, and with plastic waste informal producers now in Bangladesh, and as well as the coffee flower farmers in in Uganda, and we realized that we probably subscribe to a more conventional qualitative methods, which didn't take the full embedding immersion into account. Even when we did participatory observations, they were like a little bit shallow. And Helene showed us how we start to draw conclusion at a premature state because we are not deeply enough into the social relations of those that we collaborate with locally, meaning that we take decision on an early stage, which have some negative impacts for how the interventions would actually materialize subsequently. And that's where what Helene is talking about now, if I understand it correctly, really this admission process, really being systematic about it, not just starting to do, okay, we do a semi-structured interview guide and we do a pilot test, but we do a pilot test in a phase where we don't have the admission to the field. So de facto, if we were polemically, we would be doing a fake pilot testing because we did it at a premature stage. And this is, even when I was introduced to qualitative research, there was still this sort of semi-positivist spirit just underneath, emphasizing validity, reliability, pilot testing, and so forth. And maybe other scholars were having a different methodological background than me, but I was never introduced to how you systematically would address admission to the field and what were the implications for the type of data that you would collect. We of course knew, oh, we need to build trust, but not in a very elaborate manner, in a very shallow manner. So I think this is really one of the big things, that if you want the deep ethnographic knowledge, identifying the hidden meaning structures, how various types of themes, Helene can elaborate on them also, impact how we can co-design interventions. And I will pass on the word in 1 second to Helene.
Okay.
But for example, when we visited these handlers of producers of pellets in Old Taka, we couldn't see any transformative potential because we have no money. We don't know, we are here semi-illegally. We don't know when the government will close us. We don't have any education. We don't have competences. So we were struggling. And this is when we started to get the ethnographic entry into the field. And that opened several gates into understanding transformative potential stemming from people's own life worlds that we hadn't seen. And maybe you would like to talk about some of these.
Yes, a part of this is, of course, we collaborated with the local actors, but also having the PhD students going into the field. And they talked with them through this trust building, figuring out how were their lives, what did they do in their lives apart from being with the machines, feeling the heat from the machines, but workers didn't feel the heat anymore because it was normalized. So it wouldn't even be something you could actually be discovering through a survey or an interview, because they would never talk about the heat because it was sort of a normalized part of the worker's life in that sense. So that also leads to the sustainability and where you would focus if you do an intervention. You might focus on things that are not something they consider important.
Exactly. And
Helene, background here,
Yeah.
that if we normally did studies in intervention-oriented studies, we would focus on top management, onboarding, having like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 meetings. Here we talk about a trust-building process that lasts 3, 4, 5, 6 months before you start actually going into details about what's the collaboration.
Exactly. This is also where I wanted to come, and thank you for anticipating me, Jan Vang. So Helena was also, what was really impressive Actually, care is the golden thread in your process. So you are spending so much time in the field, building trust and creating loyalty, not seeing the participants as research subjects, but as human beings with whom you are building knowledge together. But as Jan mentioned, this take a really long time, building trust and spending time with them. Also, from our conversations, you were giving me so many examples about dancing with the people, creating workshops, and also creating these trust building activities. Can you give us some examples on not takeaways or tick box exercises, but some real life evidence and examples on how you literally orchestrated this team and trust building with the people? At the end, they became your friends rather than just research subjects.
Yeah, there's a lot of examples. I think you are invited into their hopes, you are invited into their fears. They start talking about their families and which is important for their working life, their aspirations toward the future. So
Yes.
you concretely, part of it is that you actually you care, as you say, about them. You ask if they are okay, how they feel today. You have normal conversations. You just don't jump into starting,
Yes.
I can see you feeling terrible today. You start by asking them instead of positioning yourself as the main, I'm the researcher, I can do this and this. And they start giving you advice so that you, and that sense, you know, now I'm very close to gaining, very close to immersion as such when they start giving you advice about how to behave.
I'll give you a much more practical thing that Helene is doing, because this is, of course, a little bit abstract.
Yeah.
When she flies to Uganda, you and I, we would go with our suitcase or backpack, whatever, alone. Helene brings her entire crew of unpaid child labor, equating her 4 children and using them as props when she goes to the field. And she is taking them out to the field with the farmers. And immediately, the women and Helene, they are bonding around children, talking about children and all that. And that in itself creates a fundamentally different setting than if, which in a way is having a strong emotional tie building instead of the conventional way that the typical male business school, male engineering would come with a strong logos focus, saying, "Oh, listen, I have this great idea which can create and the value proposition for you is this. Look, you will gain this and this, and if we can just co-create it together based on this." Strong emphasis on logos and what is the change potential, what is the business value, what is the outcome of it, where Helene starts with her unpaid child labor and bringing them to the field, yes?
Let's put this in a more, let's say, scientifically rigorous way. It is not unpaid child labor, but it is an emotional bond creation.
Exactly, yeah.
And but Helena, it is also really important, and we have to underline this. You don't do this for publication purposes. Also, this is important for your family on the personal level. So we also thank you for your services to the community, not unpaid child labor, as Jan pointed out, but it's like the emotional connections. But also, this is really important because at the end, this also helps you unpack some of the cultural barriers and also to understand the local context and the things that you were mentioning before about unspoken hidden realities about heat or temperature issues or stigmas around certain cultural issues to actually understand, because you said something really important. You are informed when you listen, and when you allow these individuals to speak, you also understand what you should be learning from the context. So also it is a really important way of unpacking and mitigating social and cultural barriers that we might not be even aware before being in the field.
Yeah, so you are noticing, you're using all your senses, which is also extremely important. It's not only about what you see and note down or you ask about and talk about. It's also how you sense, use your senses, and they use their senses, what they feel, how they use their hands, how they feel with their hands, how they listening, etc. So
Absolutely.
it's a materiality, how it shapes also the way you perceive part. And that comes back to the reflexivity, because so as an ethnographer, you do field logs. So you note down, but you do it in a systematic way, so you can extract that data afterwards. And also often together, almost always together with your co-workers.
Absolutely. So basically, you are creating a dialogue and you are creating evidence constantly, and you are making interpretations in real life with the people. Reflexivity, as you have mentioned it. But also, one final question to both
Maybe
of you.
adding to Helene's observation here. So, due to various issues, including the war in Iran, of course, our ability to go to Dhaka has been somewhat constrained the last month, but a couple of months. But so when the PhD students and the research fellows and local professors go out, what I have noticed is, and I would probably commit the same mistake, is we don't, when we do participatory observation, we don't genuinely observe. We tend to observe and conclude. And draw conclusions immediately, instead of doing what I have followed Helene teaching them, really being much more open-minded with not only to what is being said, and register it, including having notes on how was the experience of it, how was the interaction with the person. So you have a much more rich and with fear of being attacked here by ethnographers, much more authentic data set, yes, on the situation. Where if I compare to the initial field logs that we also made, they were much more concluding on the basis of one visit. And here they have been going out to the field. I think you have 10 plus field logs for each of them, for each covering a many visits. So 30 or 40 different field logs where there has been detailed communication of each words, how the senses were used, how to avoid jumping to conclusions, etc. And for ordinary social scientists, engineer, operations management, and social supply chain scholars, we are not trained in that tradition of really being openly immersed and using all our senses in a sort of almost unfiltered way to register so many things. We tend to
Yes.
come with an idea, and then we say, oh, we can see there are some bottlenecks in the production system here. If we reorganize this, then we are closer to, then we can enhance efficiency, reduce energy consumption, and thereby contribute to doing less environmentally harm, instead of going out much more openly. And really the effort it takes for ordinary social scientists is huge.
Yeah, and it's also more staying, what I could see, which is very interesting learning process also for me, how difficult it is to stay with the situation. They jump within 10 minutes, they already make conclusions about what this situation was about. But they actually, it was quite, I've never seen one of the conclusions be fulfilled. It wasn't that way when they then go back and look into it. No, it wasn't really what was happening, what was going on.
Exactly.
So
And
in that way, it's also important, as you as a researcher, you are reflected towards your own way of perceiving. And you use the field logs for that as well, because it's not just accumulation of another observation or another data. It's sort of systematized in a way so you can use it afterwards. It's not just a thick description, Geertz is calling it, but it's not just about 10 pages of descriptions of the green grass or the machinery doesn't work or something like that.
absolutely. And the risk is, you both highlighted something really important. Otherwise, the risk is to actually create some epistemic and methodological biases in the field. And also the risk is maybe unconsciously or subconsciously, some of the scholars, some of us, are using ethnography as a proximity with participative research. And this is what I'm hearing from you both. So we have to be really caring and careful and also dedicating and patient and generous with our time, with our energy, just to make sure the data is informing us and we are building knowledge within the details without rushing to the conclusions.
And Helene has a very good example from the field log on where from one of the PhD students where she had the aha experience of actually getting access to the hidden knowledge, and the hidden knowledge also had a material component. And you know which example I'm thinking about, yes? So feel free to share the example.
Yeah, one of our PhD students went out, and after being there for a long time, she was invited into how do they actually, normally you measure quality. She was talking about quality with the owner, and the owner said, yeah, this is good quality, this is bad, we can see it's more white and stuff. And then she realized after staying there that they measure differently. The quality is not for whiteness, they chew it. And then they can see if it's hard or not. And that way, the color is secondary. It's not how they actually measure it, even though it's for the buyers. They say this is white and less white, and you have to pay this and this. But she had a, whoa, that's crazy. I can see that they're using their body and they chew it to actually measure whether it's worthwhile selling it for a good price or a bad price. So they chew it. And she realized that she would never have found out or unfolded quality in that way with just asking questions. They would never have told her. So the whole access process has been important for her to be invited into seeing how they would never allow anybody. They also told her it's an honor having you a part that you can see it and do it that way. But she was so excited, so she told about it in several meetings.
Every meeting we have now is about chewing plastic.
So she really had this aha that I'm sure she appreciate ethnography as a different way to use this.
And what is so beautiful in rigorous and robust ethnography is all of those aha moments are in the field. We just need to be patient and smart to be able to capture those realities that are culturally and socially embedded in the context. I am so conscious of time. Otherwise, we would have been here until tomorrow. But yes,
one link to it, and so we could say from Helene's textbook, how many textbooks in operations management, supply chain management focusing on quality would actually take point of departure in a routine about chewing quality? I've never seen it. I would see a lot of lean-based issues on identifying root causes, etc., etc. None of them really for introducing and transforming systems, quality systems, having point of departure in deeply embedded routines and using them as a point of departure for which routines you should actually change or not, because chewing plastic is not terribly healthy, and on average they have a 20 years lower life expectancies than the ordinary Bangladeshi person. So there are many issues there, but also which can you change, but also which should you necessarily take as a point of departure.
Yeah.
And I think even though you're conscious of time, I think Helene has a great example also on how traditional categories, because I wanted us to study life worlds concerning social sustainability, environmental, climate, finance. And she proposed, let's look at themes like pride, shame, etc. And maybe you can fear, and maybe you can show or give the example of how, for example, status or these kind of things can be informing the interventions.
Yes, normal. What I've been reading, at least in the supply chain literature, you go to the owner, you ask permission for the owner to talk with the workers, and you invite everybody into the intervention, and they start maybe discussing, maybe not. We have this speaking up and voice. But if you look at their life's words, what is an unpacking during all these talks with them and the process of trust building, you can establish interventions that are more based on their hopes for future, their fears and pride, and you will also in that way balance the hierarchies and the alliances within, because you take them out of the box and out of the sort of ordinary intervention setup, and bring them into a common box, another box or another environment where they have maybe not the same aspirations or hopes for their kids, for their futures, for their machinery factory, but you can bring them into a conversation that can develop and give insights into how can you then transform, making the transformative part something that will last after the intervention, and not only that they tap into in an ordinary intervention saying, yeah, we will change afterwards, when we know all of us, as Jan talked about, that there's a lot of failures because it's not really embedded into their life's worlds and their fears, hopes, shame, because shame is extremely important in this environment as well, also with the farmers in Uganda.
And
Absolutely.
Game, for example, with one of the women who is an owner, she was ashamed of being in this industry, but she has no exit. She was ashamed her children might have to go into the same. So this we use or expect to use as a foundation for the transformation. How can this motivate a transformation to be her changing the process and being able to staging herself as the clean plastic waste handler? So this is a way of
that's
as
actually
point of
recycling.
departure, in this shame and her fear of shame and all that. And these are again things that at least I don't see in supply chain methods. And the same Helene mentioned the example where we were dancing with those in Uganda, creating laughter and a good psychological safety space. And what we realized is when we talked about regenerative practices, there were different groups. There were the current men subscribing to using pesticides, etc., etc. And then there were the grandparents and some young ones. And through the interaction processes, they relabeled it as grandparent farming. And then suddenly there was an alliance between the young ones and the old grandparents or grandmothers, especially on visualizing the future. We were sort of, because there's always power, yes? So we were in a way facilitating, bringing some ideas about the regenerative setting up, but letting them work with that metaphor, translating it and deciding their own strategies. And suddenly you have something that's embedded in their local culture. And it's not Global South only. We did it a little while ago with an app. There were some challenges for logistical systems that we were doing with farmers in Denmark. And we realized during the interviews that all the parameters that we were optimizing for were not really the right ones. The important ones were related to that they had to be home Friday night to be able to watch a particular show in television together with the family. That was not a parameter we had optimized for.
Yeah. So it's for totally outside their working life.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But integrated as well, and making the plans for your working life being in your household.
This is really important. And thank you for actually creating this safe space for everyone to be part of your world. And also thank you for inspiring us, all of us in the supply chain community, to understand how to approach this with care and with a more human approach. Helena, Jan, thank you so much for your time. I'm really happy that we had this conversation. So thank you so much for your vision. And please, everyone, thank you so much for listening and joining in today's conversation, and find all the papers that we will be putting under the description box below the video. So please do get in touch with Jan Wang and Helene. And this is just the beginning of a much longer conversation. So this is just the conversation starter, and hopefully we will have much more fruitful discussions in the future. Thank you so much. And Jan Wang, Helene.
Thank you so much for having us, and it's great
Thank
to
you.
seeing you. And hopefully somebody will be inspired by it and dig more into ethnography, and especially contact Helene for deeper insights into the field.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank you.
inviting.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, bye everyone. See you at the next episode, and take care.
Take good care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.